A large part of a budgetary exercise in India is about the minutiae. Yes, very much the devil is in the detail, depending on which industry you're in, that 0.5% in interest subvention or a change in a rate here or an applied cess can change your fate. So very much so, the devil is whether your petrol prices go up or your taxes go down and extra 3,000, extra 4,000. But within the exercise, there surely has to be, like for you and me, let's say we are in school and there's a unit test or an exam coming up and that's what we are focused on, but there has to be a larger vision about our education and what we want to do with life. Companies have to have that. You have to worry about whether this order came or this person fell sick and whether electricity bills are paid. You have to deal with the minutiae for sure, but you have to have a larger vision. So this is episode 2 of the NewsX Vision Cast for Budget 2024 or Interim Budget 2024. And we're going to talk about the maritime sphere. Now let's put some facts on our screens on why this is important. Ladies and gentlemen, 1% of global shipbuilding takes place in India. So of every 100 ships built in the world, only 1 gets built in India, despite the 7,500 kilometer coastline that we have. Fact number 2, 50% of global ship breaking, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, takes place in India. Okay? Fact number 3, 95% of India's overseas trade happens through merchant vessel fleets, happens via the oceans, 95%. Okay? Every product that you make, that you want to sell abroad, most of them are going to go via the sea. So it's crucial. Fact number 4, $250 billion is the projection for India's maritime economy. That's the initial projection. This is the official projection. Okay? Fact number 5, the littoral islands, which we never pay attention to, Lakshadweep has come in the news recently, but the Andaman Nicobar Islands, even though some of the islands are very tiny, because of the nautical miles they provide to your EEZ, they have a large impact on the potential maritime future of this country. Fact number 6, India has doubled its port handling capacity from 800 to 1600 million tons. This has happened in the last 9 years. So in 9 years, we have doubled our port handling capacity. So this is a proof of we can do it, but we have to do it at scale. And the last fact is that India's inland waterway capacity, which is our rivers, and we have so many rivers, has gone up from 16 million tons to 109 million tons. So almost 9x in the past few years. So now what do we need to do when we talk about a blue water economy? Ladies and gentlemen, at least 7 of the major port yards in this country have to become the state-of-the-art shipyards. We cannot be at 1% of global shipbuilding if 90% of our trade will be, even in the near future. You can build all tunnels, you can build all sorts of hypersonic aircraft, you can reach space, but like it or not, the vast majority of your trade is going to happen through shipping for times to come, decades to come. You need to look at your premier shipbuilding units, which produce most of your Navy ships. Okay, let's take the example of Mazagon Docks. Okay, built about 800 odd vessels so far, including frontline Navy ships. This needs to go up multi-fold. Okay, maybe 3x, 4x, 5x. The future of research, development, discovery of minerals, whether you find cobalt on India's ocean floor, is going to happen through UAVs, underwater UAVs. You have to be the best at that in the world. You need an institute to now start examining underwater mining. It is an industry which is going to come up so fast, just like you would have thought that oil can only be drilled on land. Then you realize the majority of the oil is in river basins or offshore, and you found it, okay, and it became a huge tens of billions of dollars of industry. Underwater mining is about to become that. So who's going to build the vessels, the technologies, train the manpower to do this? It has to be done here. That was point number 4. Let's go to point number 5. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Sagarmala project. I'm going to come to that in a bit. That's about developing India's ports, okay? And we put some statistics out on it, okay? But you need a Jalmala project as well. Our cartography and sonography of our continental shelf, which is millions of square kilometers, has to be real-time, state-of-the-art, okay? So cartography and sonography of what is underneath the ocean floor. Do we know what minerals are available there? Which are the fishing beds which need to be protected? What's where? Other than oil, not so much. We don't know. We need to find this out. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to build a blue water economy, you need to have an expanded blue water navy. So for sure, a third aircraft carrier fleet. And the last point I'm going to make, and it's a bit out of the box. What we have seen in recent past, by the Chinese are doing it or the Emiratis are doing it, of creating habitable or at least postable or dockable islands where there is only a sliver of sand. Okay? I want you to think about it. Think about the Palm Jumeirah, okay, which has been created. That's real estate that has been created out of the sea. Now we think India is a large country, you won't need it. Well, the ability to do so is going to be priceless, because the Chinese are all over the Pacific Ocean, in the South China Sea and beyond, building these artificial islands and then staking claim to the fishing waters and all around them. I'm not suggesting that we go into foreign waters, but at least in our own continental shelf waters, we should have this ability. So I've covered a broad swathe. Let me quickly introduce our guest. Professor Madhav Nalapat is with us on the broadcast. Jayjeet Bhattacharya is staying on with us. And let me quickly introduce Commodore Bhushan as well. Okay, Professor Nalapat, now, the blue water economy. We don't really understand it, but we know it's the future. How do we create a vision statement for it?
Well, the fact is, Rishabh, that as you correctly said, the blue water economy is extremely important. And as you correctly said, undersea mining is going to be very, very important in the future, especially, for example, several minerals that are being depleted, where you can find them underwater, and that capacity has got to be built. Again, you pointed it out that the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are a priceless resource to India that needs to be developed. In terms of the blue water capacity that they bring in terms of their locational advantage, and all of them have got to be made use of. Now, one point, Rishabh, I'd like to say is that, development will move upwards, but it need not move in linear fashion. 95% of our trade is carried by shipping, but an increasing proportion of our trade in terms of value is going to be carried by air, for the simple reason that a lot of that trade is now going to involve high-tech items that are going to be quickly transported. So I think, we have to anticipate the future. Now, we need all the facilities that you talked about. We need them to be futuristic. We need them to be climate resistant. And we also need to keep in mind the fact that we are now on a trajectory of high growth, a trajectory of technological prowess, and a trajectory of self-reliance. And in that, I would like to say, it's a terrible, terrible mark of our failure, of the failure of successive administrations, that only 1% of the ships used by what was once one of the premier seafaring nations of the world is built in India. 50% is broken down for scrap, but that is no consolation. And that 1% has to grow to at least about 10-15% over the next few years.
Okay, it's generally, Commodore Bhushan, is a failure of the imagination. Okay, we always seem to think, anybody watching this broadcast will have to remember in their imagination that Indonesia is actually a neighboring country. It's only a few hundred nautical miles off the coast of the Andamans. Okay, we seem to think we are a landlocked country, that it's all about Pakistan and Tibet and China, and the military all focuses there. We seem to have almost forgotten that it's a massive coastline. You have an ocean named after you, where 70-80% of the global shipping takes place literally in your footprints. How do we rediscover India as a maritime nation?
I think way back in history, we were a maritime nation, and Indian shipbuilding was well known. The ships built in Kerala or in the Tamil Nadu area were known worldwide. And I think we'll have to get back to our past glory. In between, we lost the technological gap, which I think we are now slowly rebuilding, not at the pace at which we would have desired or would have been ideal. And considering that Andamans have got about 450 islands and about 660,000 square kilometers of exclusive economic zone, which is not only we need to safeguard, but you need to also protect or control, if possible, the waterways, the seaways that where the trade goes. And to that extent, I think the government today has woken up in the sense that we have been a little late, yes, but then developing country with numerous problems, has got limited resources and many, many claimants for those resources. And though you could blame them that it has not happened as fast as we want, but I think the realization is there. Third aircraft carrier is coming. The Navy is now going around into the Aden area, picking up the Somalian pirates, going and rescuing ships. So we're making our presence felt in the blue waters of the world.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, between the Lakshadweep and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, about 1/3 of your exclusive economic zone in the oceans is covered right there. There's already a 10,000 crore development plan which was announced 2-3 years ago to develop the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, including, of course, naval upgrades. There's a 1,200 crore plan for the development of the Lakshadweep Islands, which has been announced literally a few weeks ago. We have made an effort to at least identify so many of these offshore islands, which honestly you and I don't even know about. I mean, what can we remember? We can probably remember Wheeler Island, okay, where the DRDO does the testing. But there are so many, some of them are uninhabited, okay, islands. There are thousands of them which are not in Lakshadweep. They're just offshore by a couple of kilometers. All of them need to be rediscovered. They can be the centers for your UAVs, for your startups who are doing ocean research, oceanography, sonography. It's an industry which is coming, like it or not, because the future of the world's resources are in the seabeds. We probably have cobalt lying at India's doorstep, where currently under nefarious circumstances it is produced in Africa. Let me get Jaijit here. Jaijit, there requires an imagination. I mean, inland waterways is an example, okay? We're all thinking highways, 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 okay? For obvious reasons, we're thinking airports, airports, airports. And then we forgot we have rivers. And suddenly, rivers are being rejuvenated and made navigable again, which is such a big deal. But a blue water economy, how has it escaped our imagination for so long?
So actually it hasn't, in that sense that it has not been discussed in the larger public, but initiatives such as coastal shipping, or even when we are talking about river navigation, we have a domestic waterway combined with an international waterway which goes from Kolkata through Bangladesh into Assam through the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah.
Those are big imaginative things which have already been done, executed. And there is dredging going on a continuous basis to make sure that there is enough draft water for these to be enabled. In addition to that, I also want to kind of highlight the fact that it's not just about the minerals that needs to be extracted or the transportation, but also the fact that such large areas of sea can be used for energy creation, not just wind and tidal and so on, but just growing weeds which can then be harvested for creating hydrogen or creating fertilizers and so on. It's a humongous potential that is there. In fact, Indian startups are doing it for Indonesia, but they are not being allowed to do it for India itself. So that's where I think exactly the point that you mentioned, the imagination seems to be a bit challenged, because why are we not doing agriculture on top of the oceans that we own, which is about 100 nautical miles from our coast? In addition, as you rightly said, Andaman is closer to Indonesia. And it's not just Indian Ocean. We also have the Andaman Sea,
yeah,
where bulk of the eastern trade is going through. So we have a chokehold on that particular part of the navigation that bulk of global trade goes through. In fact, most of Chinese trade is going from China through the Andaman Sea to the west, and we have a control over it. So why are we not expanding on that, and why are we not asserting ourselves is clearly an issue. And it's not that the government is not doing anything. Perhaps what we are talking about is that things needs to be hastened up. We have got the waterways numbered. The domestic, the National Waterway 1, National Waterway 2. We got the international waterways numbered. but the ports are not getting developed. If I go back into history, what happened was when the British was rolling out the railways, they want to make sure that there is no competition to railways and therefore the waterways don't work. And they actually went and destroyed the river ports. Whereas if you look at Europe, 40% of the transportation is happening on waterways. And we have destroyed it, and we have put up barrages and dams on top of those rivers, and therefore we can't navigate them anymore. It's constrained. The Farakka barrage on the Hooghly makes sure that the Ganga is not navigable right from Delhi to Dhaka. Otherwise, we could have gone from Delhi to Dhaka on a boat, and we can't do that. It's the um, cheapest form of navigation.
Yes. Okay. So, finish your thought quickly, Jayjeet. Please go ahead.
Well, I also want to put to the fact that the ships built from Bengal and Surat were one of the biggest, toughest, and cheapest ships possible. To the extent that in 1813 and subsequently in 1814, the British had to pass two regulations which stopped the Indian ships from competing with the British ships, and it destroyed the Indian ships industry through a regulation. Just want to undermine and underline the fact that India was at its top in terms of shipping till the British stepped in to destroy it, and we have continued to be in that submersive mode, and we have not been able to come out and recreate these industries.
Okay, so now the reason I'm having this telecast is so that people watching the broadcast, maybe you are a student out there, maybe you're looking for your next startup idea, maybe you're looking for your next business idea. Why don't you go see the opportunities? Look at the Sagarmala project, which is principally designed to address the porting capacity of India, provide jobs training, skill training, last mile connectivity, because you can have a port, but if it's not connected to a train line, it's not connected to a freight corridor, it loses efficiency. Look at these sectors. Maybe oceanic engineering is going to be a potential field of study. Maybe that's where you want to build your UAVs and make your next startup, because it is going to happen. Now the question is when it happens. Let me get Professor Nalapat back into this conversation. Professor Nalapat, obviously we've been seeing the Indian Navy in operations and has been making headlines in anti-piracy operations. Not for the first time, but perhaps the frequency of the anti-piracy operations we've just seen in the past 1 week have been larger than in recent memory. This is because of a broader realization that yes, indeed, ensuring that the trade routes remain free and fair is quintessential to India's prosperity.
You're perfectly right, Rishabh. And the key resource that we have is our human power, the exceptional quality of the citizens of India. As Jaydeep very correctly pointed out, they are making valuable contributions across the world. And this very interesting example of using the seas for harvesting weeds in Indonesia, and that could easily be done in India equally, if not more efficiently. So I think one really needs to look very carefully at how this immense resource that we have, that is the Indian population, is utilized. A lot of work is now going in terms of education and in not only providing education, but improving the quality of education and the type of education. Where vocational education is concerned, effort is being put in. But there also needs to be regulatory systems in place that take account of new changes in technology, new changes in markets, new changes in needs. If the regulation lags behind that, then you have a problem. So I think the regulators always got to be at least in step with what is happening and never basically be behind in the curve where these kind of changes are taking place. We have exceptional people, including at various levels of the government in India, including at several of the agencies in India, and we have an exceptional leadership. So I see no reason why this cannot be done.
Okay, let me take quick last thoughts first of Commodore Bhushan. Commodore Bhushan, with of course the immense scale comes the immense challenge. Now the Indian Navy has been a blue water navy, for a long period of time. But now we are looking at a large scale of operations, right? I'm not saying that we should be, have multiple carrier groups like the Americans operating in every part of the planet, but at least in the Indian Ocean region, in the Indo-Pacific as it is called, what do we need to do to ensure that we at least cannot be victims? I'm not suggesting that we should be the proponents of trade blockages and blockades, but not be the victims of trade blockages and blockades.
Yeah, I think the Navy will have to be strengthened, which I think the government is very aware of, and that's how the naval ships have been increasing. The last few years, if you notice, there's a lot more accretion to the Indian naval power. And the third aircraft carrier that the government is, though in the naval circles, one might even question the wisdom of having large, static, islands like aircraft carrier. But I think when you want to have a strong navy, the mobile platform of the aircraft carrier would definitely be a big help. And then in the recent last a month or so, the amount of active participation that the Indian Navy has shown, by their aircraft and by their ships and the Coast Guard put together, has I think given a message that we are there to stay and we are going to protect our shipping lanes, our trade, and also probably contribute to the world safety of the world trade through this Red Sea.
Okay. I just want to touch upon one last thing, Jayjeet, and I'll leave the last word to Professor Nalapat. Okay. So we've seen the at least the announcement of IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Trade Corridor. Okay. We're not understanding the significance of it yet because obviously the puzzle pieces need to be put. But a lot of the puzzle pieces, Jayjeet, are already there. Okay. You have the porting infrastructure on India's west coast, in Gujarat. The Dubai port already exists. The port in Haifa already exists. Is just about getting operationalized agreements. Now, in the current context of things, maybe for the next few months, it's going to be impossible. But surely, I think the intent seems to be there that this is very realistic. It's more than doable.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a little bit of challenge in terms of the cost addition because of loading and unloading that happens thrice in IMEC. But it's still cheaper than sending a ship all the way around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. So it's definitely an excellent solution. Also, as you said, there are other infrastructure that's available. There is a railway line built by the British, which goes from Turkey right through Iran into the borders of India through Pakistan. We can actually pick it up from the Chabar port. We have invested significantly. The Iranian government wants us to use the Chabar port. We can actually even activate those lines. So absolutely, these infrastructure already exist. And as you mentioned at the beginning of this call, let's say this discussion, that it's a matter of imagination. And this government has shown, a significant amount of imagination in terms of even coming out with this whole corridor, the IMEC corridor. And what we really need to do is operationalize it as quickly as possible. Obviously, there are challenges on the ground going on with the conflicts that have broken out since the time that G20 happened and IMEC was proposed.
Yes.
But I think it's time that we should push
No,
this
but
through.
I think overall, I think between the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Israelis, they are heading in the direction that they'll get beyond what is happening. Of course, it's a major concern, major issue, but eventually they get beyond it. We are certainly keen on it. Now, there will be others who don't want it to happen, but that's a separate issue. Let me quickly leave the last word to Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, so now in the projection of our country looking forward, we say developed country by 2047, Viksit Bharat. Obviously, a large part of their future development, I'm not even gone into things like underwater servers and offshore wind and offshore solar plants and tidal energy. You can keep going on and on, or fish farming. You can go on and on and on. And as I already mentioned, the reclamation, dredging, so many huge industries that have a huge scale of investment opportunity for anybody. This is not just government, this is for people watching the broadcast.
Well, you're perfectly right. And as you said, underwater domain awareness has really been very significant over the last few years. The point inland waterways, for example, they're extraordinarily cheap in terms of tonnage carried. And much better use can be made of them, and use is being made of them. The fact is, Rishabh, that India is sitting on a gold mine, and that gold mine is the Indian people. And what is needed is sufficient planning, and now we are getting more and more elements of that planning are falling into place so that the next 3 or 4 years you are going to see the period of double-digit growth. Okay. I'm quite confident of that, given the new plans that are on the anvil, given the work already done. I'm very confident that we will be entering into an era of 10 years of double-digit growth.
So for sure. But where is that puzzle piece going to come from, right? So now that's why we're having this telecast. So we've had a telecast on artificial intelligence, which is a emerging industry. Now we've had a telecast on a pre-existing multi-millennia old industry, of which India should be a major maritime power, both in the commercial and of course in the naval sphere. It should be, but it isn't. Now, hopefully this has given you an opportunity to reflect and contemplate and seek ideas and be inspired for business opportunities in this direction, because it is coming. The scale is going to be tremendous. Now, in the software sector and places where you are saturated, you can grow at a few percentage points a year, but these places are going to see exponential growth over the next few decades. Let's be in on it, both as individuals, as businesses, corporates, students, startups, and as a country.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.